Hello, and welcome to The Art of Being Human. Today I'm going to be talking about superior intelligence, people who are really, really bright. And it fascinates me. I love the study of creativity. I love the study of the process of creativity. I've written papers on it. I've studied it a good deal. And it's just something that fascinates me. One thing I need to remind you of is the fact that if you have a learning disability, that does not mean that there's something wrong with your IQ. You can be very brilliant, you can be very smart, and have a learning disability. So we do not qualify people as being bright or not so bright on the basis of whether they have a disability or not. But you'll notice if you work with children, if they're going to be disabled and slow, you're going to know it right away. I know that if you study people who are slow, people who are at the low end of the spectrum for IQ, the textbooks will always tell you that the way to diagnose somebody who has an intellectual problem is that they have to manifest that before 18 years of age. I can remember even saying that in one of my shows. But they're going to manifest it a lot sooner than that. And so you don't have to worry about it. You know, if you can handle your life, then you have good intelligence. If you can't handle your life, then you may need help with it. But at any rate, we will be dealing with superior intelligence. A child that is very bright is going to manifest that fairly quickly. And there's going to be a lot of things that they do soon. They're going to do a lot of things faster than you normally would expect them to. They're going to grow taller quicker. They're going to speak faster. They're going to crawl faster. Everything they do is going to be faster. And so you just know that they are bright. It's not just that they have superior intellectual abilities in their mind, but physically they progress at a faster rate. And people who are slower on the other end of the spectrum, they talk, it takes them longer to talk. They're slower in learning. They're slower in all kinds of things, in their movements, in their speech, in their behavior. They're slower to catch on to things. So a person who is bright or a person who is slow, it affects not only just their intellect, so that you can say, well, according to their tests, they're bright or they're not so bright. It affects everything about them, how fast they learn, how soon they walk. I know I've seen children that are very bright, and they're going to walk sometimes at 10 months old. But the people who are slower, the children who are slower, they may not walk until 18 months, even though 15 months is still considered to be the average age of walking. So I want you to listen to this quote. This is a child who's only 4 years old. And he wrote a letter, and this letter is really something else to listen to. He could speak it, and he could write it. Just think of a child that's 4 years old being able to write something like this. This is what he said. I am 4 years old, and I can read any English book. I can say all the Latin substantives and adjectives and active verbs besides 52 lines of Latin poetry. I can cast up any sum in addition and can multiply by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Written by a child. His first name is Francis. He's 4 years old. He has an IQ of about 200. Now, can you imagine a 4-year-old even being able to say something like that? Not only to say it, but to be able to have the facility to write it, to understand the English language, to understand the way that sentences are phrased, and to be able to spell all those words and get it accurately and understand it all. So I'll read it once again. I am 4 years old, and I can read any English book. I can say all the Latin substantives and adjectives and active verbs, besides 52 lines of Latin poetry. I can cast up any sum in addition and can multiply by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is a 4-year-old child, and he's absolutely brilliant, and his IQ is about 200. It is estimated that Einstein had an IQ that was approximately 200. It was never tested, but you have to think, Einstein had a learning disability. He had trouble reading. He had trouble forming words, and yet he was so brilliant in mathematics. But people, when he was very young, thought he might even be retarded because he had trouble reading, and yet he was probably the most brilliant person, we think, that ever lived, or he was around that 200 level. So this is a very young child who normally would not be able to even say those sentences, wouldn't even understand what those sentences meant, and yet he understands all the words. He can put the words together. He can write them. He is absolutely brilliant. So that's an example of a genius child. So let's take a look at superior intelligence, and I'm going to look at some of the charts I have here. About 10 in 1,000 children have an IQ of 140 or more, or above. 10 in 1,000 children. 140 is extremely gifted. When you get to 160, you're starting to think genius level. At 180, there's no question about it. That is genius level. So you stop to think about that. 1 in many thousands of people have an IQ above 160. To even reach 160 is rare. But 1 in thousands, it doesn't say how many thousands, but many thousands. Here are some definitions that you might want to consider when you consider thinking about brilliance. The capacity is your potential to learn. How able are you to learn? Ability is the level that a person can attain. Aptitude are abilities that people have. And achievement is the amount of knowledge that they have. Now, the reason that I mention this is that there is a difference between aptitude and IQ. IQ is your general intelligence. How much can you learn? How high is it? Are you genius level? Are you average? Are you a little below average? Are you normal? Whatever. Your aptitude is what you are really good in. If we take Einstein, let's say Einstein had a genius level IQ of over 200, or let's say 200 just for the sake of discussion. His aptitude in mathematics would be extremely high, but his aptitude in reading would have been lower. Low enough that some people were concerned that he had intellectual ability at all, because our aptitudes are different than our general IQ. General IQ puts it all together, but aptitude is what you are really, really good at. And so that's what that is. So let me just go over this once again. Capacity is the potential to learn. Ability is the level that a person can attain. Aptitude is what abilities you have in the specific areas that you have. And achievement is the amount of knowledge. And that gives you some basic definitions. Now, there are different types of intelligence. There are certain factors. I think I'd rather use the word factors. Factors that enter into your intelligence. What are those factors? Well, to be very bright, or even to be average, all of these things have to be considered. First, verbal comprehension. Do you have an understanding and use of words? Is it easy for you to talk? Can you get up and say sentences and talk to people and not have to worry about what's going to come out of your mouth, because it's going to be okay? You can put words together. You can put phrases together. You can have conversations with people. That's verbal comprehension, is the understanding of the use of words. Verbal fluency is producing words and speaking. So you speak to people. They're very, very much related. If you have an understanding of the use of words, then you're not going to have problems in fluency, producing words. So this is where you get your conversations. You stand up, you give a speech. You talk extemporaneously, and it's not a problem. You can produce a speaking because you have word fluency. Numbers, that's another thing to be considered. Do you have the ability to use numbers? Can you use them in mathematical formulas? Math is important. Space. This is where you deal with dimensions. Can you draw designs from memory? Can you think about something and draw it down there? This is space. Do you have a comprehension of space? We are living in three-dimensional space. Now, some people, unfortunately, with eye trouble, sometimes has a difficult time in learning because their spatial relations are gone. There is a certain difficulty, a certain learning problem where a person cannot deal with space. They have difficulty with their spatial relations, and when they do that, they have a problem in learning directions, they have a problem in driving to certain places, they have a problem in following mathematical formulas. It doesn't make a lot of sense to them. They have to go somewhere and write down the directions, because if they don't, they're going to get lost. They can't perceive directions. It's a spatial relations problem. Now, I know brilliant people that have this disorder. It doesn't mean anything in terms of their brilliance, but some people do have difficulties. Or I've heard of people who are architects. They can see a design in their mind. If they're going to be building something, they can't draw it. They can't get it down on paper because they can't relate. The brain can't put it on paper because it can't relate with what the brain is seeing. So there are all kinds of disabilities, but with space, you're dealing with dimensions and drawing designs. Then you have memory. Can you recall things? Do you remember things? Do you remember things about your childhood? If somebody tells you something, are you going to be able to remember what they're telling you? Perceptual speed. Can you grasp visual details? Reasoning. Can you find principles and solve problems with principles? If you know a certain principle, can it help you to adapt to a problem? Can you solve a problem using certain principles that you've learned? You know, one of the things in music, and I deal with music a lot, I have about 230 or so instruments, actually more than that now in my collection. If I learn one instrument well, I can apply a lot of what I've learned to other instruments to help me play other instruments, even if I haven't had lessons on them, because there are certain principles that apply from one instrument to another. If it's all woodwinds, now I wouldn't be able to do it, say, from woodwinds to a violin, because the strings are completely different than woodwinds. They don't operate the same way. But if you can take anything, mathematics or anything, and apply certain principles, you can apply it to different similar principles, and that vastly increase what you can learn and what you can do. So all of these things are types of intelligence that you need to have, or that you would have to have in order to be considered very bright. Here are the actual kinds of intelligence. Mechanical intelligence. You can work with things. You can work with machines. You can work with cars. You can work with anything that's motor driven. Then you have motor dexterity. Motor dexterity is how well you can move your hands. What can you do with your hands? Can you draw? Can you grab something with a hand and then do something else with the other hand? It has to do with the movement of your hands and the movement of your body. Then there are the artistic aptitudes, anything that has to do with art. Anything that has to do with drawing, music, poetry. People who are good at one type of art are usually good at another. People who are good at music are sometimes good at other kinds of art. They like to paint. There's a spectrum here. If you have artistic ability, you're interested in the arts, you can do a lot with the arts, and not just in one medium, not just in playing an instrument, not just in writing poetry, not just in writing a book, but there's a lot that you can do. There are many paper and pencil tests to measure intelligence, but I'm not going into those individual tests, and the reason is that I don't think it's going to do any good as far as you're learning what I want you to know. It's just going to be complicated. I do use these tests. I have used these tests, but I don't see any reason why we need to get into the nitty-gritty of them here. However, any tests that you give have got to have both reliability and validity, and this is the difference between them. Anytime that a test is going out to be researched, to possibly give to other people, say to be given to a high school to see what abilities and aptitudes are, they have to have reliability and they have to have validity, and there's a lot of research that's done on them. So if I want to test, I want to check if a test is reliable, I'll give a test to many people, and then I'll give it to many other people. If the test is reliable, it's going to come out with the same kinds of test scores over a long period of time. So for example, if I give you an IQ test and you come out at, say, 100, and that's going to be just very normal. Then I give it to you again and it's 115. That's okay. It's still a good test. Or I give it to you a third time and it comes out 95. That's still okay. It's in the range that it needs to be. If you take a test, you have your score and it's probably accurate 10 to 15 points above it or 10 to 15 points below it. You're interested basically in the range, and if you keep on getting in the range, no matter how many times you take that test or a similar test, then you can say that test is reliable. And you do it over and over again for many, many people over many months of study. They don't just take a few tests and then put the testing instrument on the market. It has to really be reliable. Validity is another thing. The test, to be valid, the test has to test what it is supposed to. Like, for example, if I'm testing for IQ, then I got to make sure that IQ is really what's being tested, not something else. If I give a group of IQ tests to people and they come out normal for the most part, it may be very valid. But what if I give that test to people from a foreign country that don't understand our culture and they're not that good in our language? I may not actually be testing their IQ. I may be testing their ability to discern what roots of words they can understand, how they apply them to figure out what they mean, or maybe they just can't do the test at all. Has the test failed? Well, it's not valid for what I want it to be. If I want a test to be valid, it's got to test what I want it to test, and it's got to do so consistently. So reliability and validity are the two key things that a test has to have in order to continue to use it. So I think what I'll do, is close it here. I have something else I want to do, but if I start it, I'm going to get in the middle of it and not be able to finish it. So I think we'll close it here, and I'm going to continue next time with giftedness and understanding what creativity is and different aspects of creativity. So we'll close it here, and please join me next time.